Good morning, everybody. I'm now calling this Housing and Community Development Committee informational meeting to order. For the information of the members, this is being streamed online. Dina, can you please take attendance?
Chair Markosik.
Here.
Rep. Abney.
On leave.
Rep. Boyd.
On leave.
Rep. Brown.
On leave.
Rep. Cephas.
On leave.
Rep. Green. Rep. Krajewski.
On leave.
Rep. Madsen.
On leave.
Rep. Mays.
On leave.
Rep. Powell.
On leave.
Rep. Probst.
On leave.
Rep. Siegel.
On leave.
Rep. Smith-Waddell.
On leave.
Rep. Waxman.
On leave.
Chair Irvin.
Here.
Rep. Bashline.
On leave.
Rep. Jones.
On leave.
Rep. Kephart.
On leave.
Rep. McKenzie. Rep. Major.
On leave.
Rep. Brazel.
On leave.
Rep. Rossi.
Leave.
Rep. Schaefer.
He was here. Here, he's just come. Oh, no, that's Walsh. On leave.
Okay. Rep. Tomlinson.
On leave.
Rep. Walsh. Rep. Weekneck.
Thank you, Dina. I would like to note that there are multiple other committee meetings going on, so we should have folks coming in and out. With that, today we will be having a update from Ms. Wiessmann, Executive Director and CEO of the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. After her statement, I ask members to please be concise with your questions, since we have to be back on the floor in about 50 minutes. So with that, Robin, please.
Got it. Let's see. There, now it's bright. Good morning, Chairman Markosik and Chairman Irvin, and members of the House and Community Development Committee. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. My name, as the chair said, is Robin Wiessmann. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. By way of background, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, or PHFA as it's typically known, is the Commonwealth's leading finance organization for affordable homeownership and rental housing development. The agency was created by the legislature in 1972 with a core mission of financing affordable housing opportunities for low and moderate income households, older adults, and people with special housing needs. The agency achieves this goal by utilizing the authority granted to it under both state and federal law. PHFA primarily raises revenue for its programs through the sale of tax-exempt and taxable securities. The agency has historically operated within three key areas: financing home ownership through a variety of affordable mortgage products, financing of affordable rental housing development, and foreclosure prevention. I will focus primarily on our activities today within the single-family and multifamily areas. First, on home ownership opportunities and programs. PHFA offers a number of home purchase mortgage products tailored primarily to first-time homebuyers with moderate incomes. All of PHFA's mortgages contain 30-year fixed-year terms. This is a public-private partnership. We utilize a network of participating lenders that interested homebuyers work directly with, from determining the best product fit to loan origination and closing. Upon closing, PHFA then purchases those qualifying loans and services them in-house here in Harrisburg. And that is for the duration of the loan. In fact, we consider it financing with the heart, because we have actual people to answer the phone if people have questions about their mortgage, unlike a lot of typical market participants. We understand that the need for down payment and closing cost assistance are the key hurdles to a home ownership today. And we have made that a priority, down payment and closing cost assistance, through our Keystone Forgivable in 10, or K-FIT program, which helps Commonwealth residents obtain home ownership by eliminating this barrier. It's an excellent, excellent product. I'm now going to talk just for a minute on financing of affordable rental housing development and preservation. PHFA is the state's administrator of the federal low-income housing tax credit, which is known as LIHTC, which is credited as being the primary tool to create and preserve affordable rental housing nationwide. The program was designed to encourage private sector investment in affordable rental housing development and preservation. Again, very much a public-private partnership. The agency receives an annual allocation of credits, which are determined through a formula based on population. In conjunction with the LIHTC, PHF also receives several supplemental resources that we pair with LIHTC to assist with developing and preserving affordable rental housing. Those resources include the Pennsylvania Housing Tax Credit, the National Housing Trust Fund dollars, and a portion of the state's allocation of the Federal Home Investment Partnership dollars that DCED sub-allocates to the agency, specifically for pairing with LIHTC. So the funding sources are multiple for the original capital stack for multifamily development. Foreclosure prevention. For over 40 years, PHFA has administered the Homeowners Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program, or HEMAP as it's generally referred to assist homeowners with prevention of foreclosures stemming from defaults that are outside of their control. In most cases, applicants have experienced a job loss, reduction in hours, or medical emergencies. But for this program, there is a reasonable expectation that they will be able to resume their full mortgage payments in the near future. HEMAP is a loan program. However, monthly repayments are based off of annual recertifications and can be as low as $25 a month when instances dictate that the homeowner would benefit from that. Another line of business is our counseling initiatives. PHFA maintains partnerships with HUD-certified counseling agencies across the Commonwealth to assist residents with a variety of needs. Program offerings include pre-purchase and homeownership counseling, financial education, and foreclosure prevention counseling. They are all available free of charge to PA residents. PHFA is able to offer these resources through the availability of federal grants and a commitment of agency resources. Our counseling network currently consists of 60 agencies across the Commonwealth. Live and recorded webinars and online courses are available directly from PHFA's website, and in-person virtual counseling is available by contacting a local participating agency directly. From time to time, the agency has been tasked by the legislature with administering special programs that complement these core business areas: the single-family, the multifamily, foreclosure prevention, and counseling. PHFA currently operates 3 programs. The Pennsylvania Housing Tax Credit, which I mentioned previously, is relatively new. It is part of our multifamily initiatives and is used exclusively as a gap financing tool in conjunction with the Federal Low Income Housing Tax Credit, the LIHTC program. PHFA receives an annual authorization of $10 million in state tax credits, which are partnered with these LIHTC applications to further help reduce the gaps in development costs of affordable housing developments. To date, we have awarded approximately $30 million. In the current competitive 9% LIHTC cycle, 35 applicants, just so you have a sense of demand, 35 applicants have requested PHTC allocations of approximately $35 million. And that's for 1 year. And as I articulated, it's $10 million a year. Another supplemental program is the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement, FAIR program. FAIR, which is commonly referred to as the State Housing Trust Fund, is the agency's most flexible funding source and assists with a broad range of affordable housing-related activities. It's extremely popular, and it's driven by the interests and demands, interests of the communities. It's community-driven. Since its creation more than a dozen years ago, FAIR has touched programs or projects in every county of the Commonwealth through its 2 state-funded lines. It receives a portion of the Marcellus Shale impact fees and the realty transfer tax funds. Just to indicate the popularity of this program, in this current cycle, FAIR received more than 580 applications seeking more than $278 million between Marcellus Shale and RTT funding sources. We currently anticipate a summer announcement regarding the current application cycle. But to date, $290 million of FAIR funding has been awarded, which we estimate leverages more than $1.6 billion in terms of community development and revenue generation by virtue of the various initiatives. The third supplemental program that I want to address today is the Mixed-Use Development Tax Credit and Community Revitalization Fund Program. This was established by the Commonwealth in 2016. The Mixed-Use Development Tax Credit receives an annual allocation of $4.5 million in state tax credits. PHFA then wholesales the tax credits to the highest eligible bidders. And by that, I mean it's not tied to any particular development. That's what we mean by wholesale. And subsequently, it administers the proceeds of the sales through the highly competitive Community Revitalization Fund Program. The tax credits that are part of the LIHTC program, both the federal tax credits and the state housing tax credit, are tied to individual projects. The developer obtains the tax credit through syndicators. On the Mixed-Use Development Tax Credit and the Community Revitalization Fund Program, the funding is awarded to financially viable mixed-use projects containing both commercial and residential components. And those are consistent with a well-defined community development or revitalization plan. Grants are accompanied by a 10-year affordability commitment for the rental units, which are targeted to households at or below 80% of the area median income. Preference is given to projects that commit to longer periods of mixed use in scope and residential affordability. This is something that you would typically see in some of the smaller communities around the state who are really working on downtown revitalization, where there's commercial and then a few units above. I'm sure with your interest in community development, you're well aware of these. Those are my formal remarks, and I am happy, if I haven't put you to sleep, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I am very thankful for your testimony today. Before we get started on questions, we have been joined by Rep. Jones, Representative Madsen, Representative Rosal, Boyd, Powell, Waxman, and online by Representative Tomlinson. So with that, I will open up the questioning. Just a very quick question for myself and for us up here. So how does PHFA obtain the assets to finance your home ownership programs?
Great question. As you well know, the agency does not receive appropriations from the Commonwealth. The way we finance our home ownership program is by going to the public capital markets and issuing bonds very specific to the mortgages that we underwrite. The indenture for the bonds is very tailored to the actual performance and amortization of these home ownership loans. So we have a very significant portfolio. And we sell them very frequently. We're typically in the market, historically, I think it was 2 or 3 times a year, but because of the demand and the success of the single family, particularly with the down payment and closing cost assistance, we've been in the market 4 times last year, and we expect to be in the market 4 times this year. We've already been in the market once this year.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Ms. Wiessmann, for being here. This, I think, just from what you have explained to this committee and what I've learned over the last going on 3 years of being chairman of on the Republican side of the Housing Committee, there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of things to learn, and a lot of drinking from the water fountain, at least that I had, or from the fire hose that I had to do just to learn what's going on and how everything sort of ties together. Quick question on, first of all, the fair funding. And we've actually increased the fair funding that will be coming from $60 million to $100 million by 2027. You had indicated this is some of the most flexible funding source that you have to help with the different programs. What exactly do you think is the best direction, or the PHFA will be using that fair funding additional money for?
So that's a great question. We've been very clear. Because we do not want it to become overly prescriptive, and we want the demand to be driven by the communities. They put in their requests, they design it, and it's not as rigid for qualifying as the LIHTC, the tax credit deals, are. We generally, and the board approves preferences in any given cycle. And the preferences have been for lots of community needs for smaller projects, things that would not have the scale of a LIHTC, or that could support LIHTC financing. So it's very small projects. Some of it is support for community development processes. And then we also, to a limited degree, will allow it to be used for some what we call sticks and bricks, hard development, and it can augment the LIHTC if necessary. That has been much more limited because we've wanted to make sure that the uses for it are, as I mentioned, driven by the community and for those that don't neatly fit into LIHTC programs. There may, since from the onset of the pandemic, there was federal funding that provided gap fillers for a lot of LIHTC programs. You may recall that there was an increase in inflation, and therefore the cost of getting developments completed was going up. And my goal from the very start was to keep the conveyor belt moving, to make sure the developments kept moving, because housing is such a great need in the Commonwealth and across the country. A lot of those resources will be completed and are basically done, and we don't expect there to be more federal resources currently. So our expectation is that some of the fare, but not a significant portion, could be allocated to some of those programs.
Yeah, and speaking of the federal funding, and is what's your how much federal funding or gets pushed down to PHFA, and what concerns moving forward do you have with any of the federal funding or lack of federal funding that may be coming into the state?
Well, we knew that under the American Recovery Plan, we got very significant dollars for that, and all of that will be used up. The federal funding that comes to the agency is really those funds that I mentioned that come through DCED, the Housing Trust Fund and the home. Now, we already know, and those are derived through formulas from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, as well as other formulas. We already know that those were expected to go down significantly. They're much less this year than, and again, these weren't tens of millions of dollars at this point anyhow. It's more like $6 million. So we don't expect them to be a large amount. I do think there's some concern about what will happen to federal counseling funding and the home and the housing trust fund. Those are the three areas. They're not the LIHTC, I think, and I've been asked to comment on it quite a bit. I think there's such broad, again, because there's public-private partnership, there's such broad support, and it's such a well-established program that works. I think the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Coalition in Washington fully expect that this program will continue. And I think at the end of last year, they were even hoping that the amounts might be increased. They were at a higher level a few years ago. So it is the smaller, I would say, the smaller pieces of funding that we think are at risk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have been joined by Representative Kephart. We'll now open up to questions from the committee members. Anyone has any? Don't be shy. Rep. Powell?
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you so much for your time. One of the things that I'm very interested in expanding here in Pennsylvania is the opportunity to house more folks at the 80 to 120% AMI. As you can imagine, when it comes to affordability, that's a chunk of largely working folks, working families that may not have access to the same kind of deeply affordable either tax credits or grants eligible afforded from the state level as well as from different municipalities' housing efforts. Could you talk a little bit about your efforts to better house that missing middle and to house working families in the Commonwealth?
Well, I want to be clear just up front that the role that we have has been very well defined through the LIHTC program and the single-family home ownership and the programs that I've mentioned. I do think that many of our programs reach up towards that level, and not all of it's at the 30%. We do have a fair amount that go up. But there's no question, I think that's referred to as the missing middle or, that sort of thing. We cannot finance that through the very strictly legislated LIHTC program. We have to abide by those programs, by the requirements of those programs, as well as for the single-family home ownership. They're very strict requirements. So specifically addressing that group of homeowners would likely come from the state and the state legislature. We're happy to do anything that we can on it, but it is not currently within our jurisdiction or within our mandate. We are, having said that, we're very holistically we view housing very holistically and are giving a lot of input to people, interested parties in the legislature and elsewhere about what some of the ideas are, and we certainly could do that, but it would not come through our very circumscribed revenue streams now.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from members? Representative Wiessmann.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time and the importance of PHFA. And I just wanted to acknowledge, I represent Center City, Philadelphia, downtown, and I just want to acknowledge that the programs that you support and the financing that you do has really helped support a number of low-income buildings in my district that provide a way for people of limited economic means to be able to live right downtown in Center City. And I'm just looking at the list here that was in my packet, and we work so closely with so many of these buildings, just on a lot of different issues and a lot of different programs, and they're wonderful additions to Center City and to my district. I'm wondering, as you are, what goes into how you might pick a project, especially when you're looking at density. We have some buildings that I think have close to 300 units that are in my district, and those are some of the most successful buildings. So I'm kind of wondering about how density factors into what you do and how you pick the projects and what kind of financing is available.
Certainly. We have a qualified application plan, which is the primary tool we use for determining which projects, which developments are awarded tax credits. I want to say in that the requirement is that there be equitable distribution across the Commonwealth. So we are very focused on making sure that there's an equitable distribution of tax credits and resources across the Commonwealth. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there are two types of tax credits that we administer. The 9% tax credits, and these are both the federal tax credits. The 9% tax credits are those that lend themselves most to new construction, because as the wording implies, when you have a 9% tax credit and you get the value of that tax credit under the federal program, you get the value of that tax credit once a year for 10 years, it really lends itself to new construction that's more expensive. The other tax credit that we use, which is probably more applicable to existing properties, and preservation is a big focus of the agency and the Commonwealth, because we have some of the oldest housing stock in the country. Making sure we preserve and maintain the housing stock is really important. So the 4% tax credits, which we award on a rolling basis now, are those that we use for some of the larger developments. We have criteria the board reviews on the qualified application plan so that we can obtain the best results given all of the competing priorities and interests and needs across the state. We could use a lot more tax credits in order to meet all of them. But we do a quantitative and qualitative evaluation. It's very, very specifically enumerated. And one of the biggest things that I look for is this a deal that will get to completion? How good, is it a good deal? But that's not just my instinct. It's based on all the facts and the evaluation, the scoring that we do and I think that, we do cross-cut analysis on all of it. But the one other thing I want to point out to you is we don't make the determinations. The communities and the developers make the determinations of the developments they want to bring to us. We're not dictating what kind of developments and who should be bringing and what type. That's where the public-private partnership comes in.
So just as a follow-up, is that okay? Just as a follow-up, just, you know, the one of the unique things about my district, and in particular some of these developments that are there, is that the reason that they're able to work is because they are oftentimes situated on the top of mass transit hubs, and in particular, like I'm just looking at John Fox Towers, which is on my list here, which is, I think, the largest. And that building is situated on top of a trolley line where multiple trolley lines come through. There's multiple bus lines that come right there. And that allows people to be able to, you know, live without a car, still be able to get around, you know, which is obviously important for certain populations. And so, as a follow-up, I'm wondering, how do transit-oriented development projects, how do they factor into what your agency does and how you approach what you do?
One of the things we do, again, not being top-down prescriptive, we don't dictate everything that has to be in it, but we do create incentives by giving additional points. And we have historically called some of them areas of opportunity, where there hasn't been a lot of low or middle income housing, but there are great schools and great access to transit and that sort of thing. So we might give points for that. We also give points for, have given points for transit, those that are located near transit. And of course, we do have some requirements for accessibility into buildings, but there's also a lot more. We try to lead with incentives rather than dictates.
Thank you, Rep. Waxman. Any other questions from members? Sure.
Thank you. Again, the packet that you have provided us with, which is specific to our district, is very nice, helpful, and so thank you for putting that out. And I'm sure you probably put that out for every member of the legislature as well. And,
Yes.
And that's very helpful, so we can see where you're making a difference in our own districts. Obviously, in the middle of a housing crisis, as we are right now, you know, your younger generation not able to afford the down payments or even the home loans, to fight the housing crisis and what we're dealing with currently. What program do you see being probably the most effective that you administer to help, you know, the best bang for our buck, I guess, is where I'm asking.
Right. I want to say that across the Commonwealth, you mentioned the lack of access to affordable housing for the younger generation. That's one of the things that's driving the need for senior housing, because seniors need to have places to downsize to create that healthy turnover to next generations. That's an aside, but it's it's an important one. And the one thing that I know is really true across the Commonwealth is that the housing needs are the same everywhere. You have real commonality of interest, whether you're urban, suburban, or rural. So none of you have to worry about whether or not there may be specifics in specific areas, but there is a commonality of interest for the same needs across the Commonwealth. You know, housing supply, the biggest issue is housing supply, period, end of story. And our population has grown and housing has not grown. I won't comment on the luxury housing market because I don't have subject matter expertise in that. But I do know that there isn't, you know, housing has not kept pace with population growth and needs and preservation, which of course is important to keep the affordable house that you have that you can stay in. So I think I refer to housing development, and I really believe in scale, but I refer to housing development and as a patchwork quilt. I think it's very difficult to pinpoint one. As I would re-emphasize that fair is so important, but fair alone doesn't necessarily create scale in terms of the the places where you want 75 or 100 units. FAIR doesn't address that. So the LIHTC program is the linchpin for anything like that. And to the extent that you talk to any of your federal counterparts, I would really emphasize that. We are informing them, and actually have very good support from the Pennsylvania congressional delegation on LIHTC. So there isn't any one, I mean, unless you want to just invest and give us a ton of money that we can administer most appropriately,
You're not
I
gonna
would
turn
say
it
that would be
down.
the most valuable. Absolutely. And truly, that's why I'm emphasizing how mutual your interests are on this. The other thing that I'm so struck by in terms of housing is the fact that it's the biggest, I'm a former infrastructure investment banker, and I view housing as American infrastructure. So I don't think you can put, it's such an economic driver. We think the multiplier just for the FAIR program is for every dollar spent, it's $8 for the economy. So any money that you spend to be responsibly administered on housing, you will get an economic multiplier for. So you can all feel very secure about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been joined by Rep. Rossi has joined us. Just to piggyback off of the chairman's
Isn't
question.
it the same thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Sort of the
same thing,
right?
Right, yeah, piggyback. You briefly mentioned our senior housing. My grandparents are 93. Knock on wood, they're in their own home still, but that day's coming where they're going to have to downsize, and the costs of them moving into a whatever the situation may be is very, very costly. So if you could just maybe briefly touch upon what's out there for our seniors in terms of, because I know in my case, my own family, they want to stay in their home, but at some point that's just not going to be possible. So if you could just maybe touch on that briefly, I appreciate it.
Well, as you know, there is, again, there's a grouping of, for later in life, there's a grouping of different kinds of facilities. One, of course, is one that Medicare pays for, and that's a state-run, and public-private partnership there with a lot of insurance administrators. There are lots of them who are in the Medicare business, so there are those kind of facilities. But then most people who are trying to step down into something else really have to find their own way. There are all these retirement communities, which are terrific models now, but they are not for the middle class. They're generally for the more affluent. So that's where affordable housing for seniors is really important for people who are of more moderate means. I think it does come back to supply in terms of trying to create more affordable, truly middle class housing, as opposed to the two ends. You have the very affluent retirement communities, and then you have the Medicare ones. And what we're looking for is that another missing middle, I guess.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. My grandparents, they are on a very tight fixed income, and
Yes.
they cannot afford $8-10 grand per month to move into a center or into a home. And
Right.
you
But, that's where, and a lot of people want to remain active in communities. That's where a lot of the mixed-use development tax credit, or some of the smaller landlord projects and developments can be really important. Because not everybody necessarily wants to live in a 200-unit place. So there is a mix.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For your
And we're
testimony.
happy. Oh,
Yeah.
by the way,
I'm sorry.
in your packages, you have some of the flyers where I'm working on us marketing the agency. Just really, so everyday people are much more aware of it. We have a hotline that people can call into. We have a website, as we ought, and everybody knows. But also the flyers you have, if you need any of them for any of your legislative districts, we're happy to supply them to you. And we're very pleased with this down payment and closing cost program. I think it's one of the best in the country. So I would encourage you to spread the word in your districts.
Thank you again, Robin, for coming today. And with that, we are adjourned.